The Afghanistan withdrawal, it was a complete and utter disaster, not only for the Afghan people and the Americans and our troops and the Marines and our US intelligence, but basically for the entire world. For the entire world. It set the stage for the disastrous foreign policy that has come into play under the Biden administration. It has given Biden the crown of I am the worst president ever in the history of the United States. President Carter no longer wears that crown. And a lot of this started under Biden when he made the decision, along with the White House, to have an immediate withdrawal from Afghanistan, unbeknownst, really, to so many people. It was so highly classified, this withdrawal. And there were people even within the intelligence community that were on their way to Afghanistan to work operations that didn't even realize until they landed on the ground that the Biden administration had planned to jump ship literally outside of the kingdom. I'm going to go into those details, but I want to play this clip for you. Because it's an absolute embarrassment and it's a lie. And I know John Kirby, and he is the Pentagon spokesman. And I want you to hear what he had to say about the worst withdrawal in American history and after our longest war. Listen to this.
Get planes coming in and getting them loaded, have medical screening, have security vetting, have diplomatic presence on the ground to make sure that we're putting the right people on planes, but also defend that airport from external threats. That's pretty remarkable. And so for all this talk of chaos, I just didn't see it. Not from my perch.
Not from his perch. Where is his perch? His perch is somewhere in Arlington, Virginia, where he gets press releases, by the way, that he helps create. The big lie, the big press release lies that he helps put together there at the Pentagon. I used to work in the Pentagon. I bet you a lot of you didn't even know that. I used to go down to the Pentagon all the time. I was actually the Pentagon correspondent for the Washington Times. And I traveled overseas with Admiral Kirby. I went overseas with him and Admiral Mullen and others at the Pentagon many times when I was working as a war correspondent. I also traveled many times to Afghanistan, where I just spent time with our troops on the ground, whether that would be Marines or Army or Navy. Yes, we had Navy in Afghanistan and Air Force, and also with our National Guard. Some of our men and women served over and over and over again when there was stopgap. A lot of you probably don't even remember that, but it's when we had to keep people in the line of fire. We had to keep people in the war zone, and they didn't get the breaks that were necessary to kind of rehabilitate themselves. They were constantly being set back in because we only have so many people volunteering to fight these wars. And Kirby should be so ashamed of himself. What a liar. What a liar. It was absolute and utter chaos. It was so embarrassing and gut-wrenching and heartbreaking what happened at the end, that there were no words to express. He should be so ashamed of himself. How many young men and women left their lives in that country, in the empire where empires go to die? That's how Afghanistan is described. I'm going to tell you about those days, and we're going to juxtapose that with the lies coming from the Pentagon. That's what I want to do. I want to explain to you what really happened, because I was on the phone every night during that withdrawal. We had friends in the region. I had also Afghan allies and friends in the region that we helped, my husband and I and others, including Senator Tom Cotton, including Congressman Mike Garcia out of California, that we helped get out of that godforsaken withdrawal, that horrific mistake made by the Biden administration. We were able to do that against all odds, the very few people that were saved and salvaged. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes when I come back. But first, Allegiance Gold. There has never been a better time, and I am not kidding when I say this, folks. There has never been a better time to diversify your money. We are on the brink of war. Everywhere I look, from China out in the South China Sea and the actions that the Chinese are taking there. We see what is happening in Ukraine. We see what Russia has done and how China and Russia are taking our allies, even Saudi Arabia and others like in Brazil, taking them, turning them upside down on their heads. No longer the US dollar is the ultimate goal. No, it's the Chinese yuan. It's Russia. These are our enemies. There is a realignment right now, and you need to diversify. If you want to be able to protect your money, you're going to want to go to Allegiance Gold. Gold and silver, that will allow you to protect what you've worked so hard for. Believe me, it will allow you to protect that. It won't give the banks all the power. And we saw what happened with the banking system under COVID. We saw what happened in Canada. We saw what happened here in the United States when they removed Don Jr. from one bank. And when Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, the bank was threatening to kick him out. And he just said, you know what? You don't need to threaten me. I no longer want to be a part of your bank. That can happen to each and every one of us. And there are things happening right now changing so fast, we can't even keep up with it. Well, right now you can get $5,000, listen to this, of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. You have to tell them that Sara sent you. My friends at Allegiance Gold can help protect your IRA, your 401k with physical gold and silver, or have it delivered securely right to your door, right? Right there, right at your door. They will educate you on the benefits of physical gold because they care and they want to build a long-term relationship with you. Allegiance Gold also has the highest ratings in the industry. Listen to this, 5 stars with TrustLink, AAA rated with the Business Consumer Alliance, and they have an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. That's Sara, S-A-R-A. Don't wait. Call or click today, 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, or protectwithsara.com. So for those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know, or been reading my stories, you know that I covered the war in Afghanistan off and on from 2007 all the way up until I went to Iraq was actually the last time in the war zone for me. And that was in Iraq, not Afghanistan, in 2015. So I traveled in between 2007, 2013, 14, in and out of Afghanistan, covering stories, bringing you the latest from the front lines, what was happening on the intelligence levels there, especially dealing with, the changes that were occurring in Afghanistan as we tried again and again to find some solution to a region of the world that literally is like 2,000 years ago. It's like traveling in time. And I explained to people this, how difficult it was for our Pentagon, right? The Pentagon, ISAF, our allied partners in the region, they just couldn't get it. They just didn't get what was happening there. It was like they were learning on the job, which was disastrous, in my opinion. And I was there from the time I remember McKiernan led ISAF all the way to the very end. I remember Petraeus, and then the very last commander of ISAF, Scotty Miller, who was there, a fantastic leader, a fantastic person that stood by the sides of all of our troops. Who didn't stand by the side of our troops and those who have sacrificed so much and those who spent so much of their life in that faraway region of the world was President Joe Biden. I remember talking to President Trump when he was in office. I remember him asking me one time in particular about Afghanistan and how concerned he was about the fact that we were still in the region and that there were US troops still on the ground, and that the Department of Defense didn't actually offer him anything tangible, although he had asked over and over again for a plan for withdrawal. They just never gave it to him. He would demand it, and it wouldn't arrive at his desk. And he did want to remove troops from the region. But he didn't want to do it the way that the Biden administration eventually did it. He wanted to be able to withdraw from Afghanistan by holding on to Bagram, which was very, very important to us. It was our base there, a massive base outside of Kabul. And he wanted to be able to do it in a way that would not give the Talibs and the Taliban control of the city during the withdrawal. Let me tell you, well, first, let's play this first clip about, this is the one where John Kirby is criticizing and trying to blame the disastrous withdrawal, because he knows it's disastrous, on President Trump. I want you to take a listen to this.
And he inherited a deal struck between the previous administration and the Taliban that called for the complete removal of all U.S. troops by May of 2021, or else the Taliban, which had stopped its attacks while the deal was in place, would go back to war against the United States.
First of all, the Taliban is not going to go to war against the United States. They don't have the capability. Well, maybe now. They didn't then. Secondly, the Trump administration was working through the details of how that withdrawal would take place with the Taliban, which is why President Trump did not do it at that time, which is why it was extended, yes. But that's not to say that President Biden didn't have the power to make his own decisions. He turned over and allowed our government, our State Department, to turn over lists of names that people that were leaving Afghanistan and Kabul. These are people that worked against the Taliban. So they basically handed the enemy names, lists of names of people that were exiting the country. They walked away from Kabul. That is the Biden administration, our nincompoops in the Pentagon, and whoever else was involved in this withdrawal, which I can tell you were not the people on the ground, because they were caught completely off guard. And that includes Americans that were on the ground. U.S. intelligence, U.S. military, everybody was caught completely off guard. And what happened was they turned over the names to the Taliban. The Taliban began setting up checkpoints inside Kabul and outside Kabul. They were already targeting people. I remember, because my friend Shardil, thank God, who is here now with his children, was calling me on the phone outside of the gates at Kabul International Airport, saying he could not get in. And he was sending me pictures, and this was on WhatsApp, and he was just showing me the chaos of what was going on around him. While that was happening, I had other friends, Salim and others, contacting me, trying to get out. I was contacting Senator Tom Cotton. I was contacting Congressman Mike Garcia. I was talking to people on their staff. We were literally working operations from the United States in our kitchens, in our bedrooms, not sleeping at night. I remember Simone Ledeen, very good friend of mine, Assistant Secretary of Defense. She was on the phone, working the phone lines. I remember Mary Beth, another friend of mine who worked at the Pentagon, on the phone, working behind the scenes, trying to save people's lives. I remember it got to the point that my telephone number was being circulated in Kabul, and people I didn't even know were calling me from Afghanistan and from the United States, Afghans, asking me, how can I help get them out? That is how bad it was. It was an utter and complete disaster. It was an embarrassment. It is the reason why the Russians, along with the Iranians, along with the Chinese, by the way, China took Bagram Airfield. Yes, China has Bagram Airfield. By the way, China even jumped into Afghanistan much before we even decided to withdraw, even before President Trump. I remember when I was going to Afghanistan and the Chinese government was down there trying to cut deals on the backside, not only with the Afghan government under Karzai, and I'm talking dirty dealing, right? I'm talking money. People were bidding for these mines in Logar province. It was in southern Afghanistan, Logar mining. And the Chinese apparently came in and they brought cash with them and they paid people off so that they could continue mining operations. The land is rich in mining. It also has a lot of gas and there's pipelines up in the north. And Afghanistan is also situated in a very important part of the region of the world where we can keep our eye on, Iran. You can keep your eye on what's going on in Tajikistan and all those other important places, China, where we have, very reasonable issues with. These are our adversaries. Afghanistan borders Iran. What better place to keep an eye on what is happening in Iran than in Afghanistan? But that's for another discussion. But what about those people that were there and that were allies of ours? What about the 13 Marines that were at Abbey Gate when the Taliban, which was charged with that gate, allowed one of their own to bring an explosive to that gate, a suicide, a VBID, a vehicle-borne IED device, and just blow up innocent men, women, children, 13 of our Marines, and wound how many more? And I remember being on the phone. I had just been on the phone with a young girl who was escaping Kabul University. I'm just telling you this. I'm hoping that Kirby's listening to me. I hope you're listening to me, John, because I was on the phone with a young student from Kabul University whose husband was here in the United States, in New York, and she had been working there. And she was crying profusely on the phone with me. And before that bombing took place at Abbey Gate, she and I were on the phone with her husband. She was sending me different pictures of how she should dress to walk all the way. She had to take a taxi. Her uncle sat in the taxi with her, and they drove to a gate. She was by herself. Imagine that, after her uncle dropped her off, an Afghan woman alone, having to pass through a Taliban checkpoint, having to pass through, and they weren't letting her go through. She was crying on the phone. She called. She said she was going to turn back. I told her husband, tell her right now that she has no other choice. If she turns back, she will not get out of Afghanistan. This is her last chance. And I knew this because people inside the base, Americans, were telling me that Biden was folding, that everybody was going to be abandoned, and if the people didn't get through those gates, that they would be left behind. And guess what they did? She decided to stay. She decided it was worth maybe risking her life. Yeah, thanks, Dylan Mulvaney. Not you on the Bud Light can. But she actually believed it risked her life instead of living there, right? Instead of leaving her husband and everything behind, she would have rather died. And I found someone that was helping people get through the gates. And by the grace of God, somehow I got this person to come all the way down through the gate, pay some money to this Taliban guard to let her pass by. and then get her through the gate. She got within the airfield about 10 to 15 minutes before the bomb went off and everyone was killed. So she was right there with the bomber before that. That's the chaos that people lived through. They were throwing their children over fences. They were crying. Women were getting beaten. I had pictures of women with blood all over their face getting beaten by the Taliban, telling them that they had to go home and that they would find people that worked with the United States and execute them. And they did that to many of them. It was a complete nightmare. And my friend Salim, whose baby boy was born, Ahmed, on the day that the Taliban entered Kabul, he and his wife were able to manage to make it out. We got them in and they were able to escape right before Biden shut everything off. But I want to talk to you about all those people that didn't get a chance to escape. Not only the lives that we lost, the American lives, but the ones that clung and hung from those C-130s as they were taking off. We're going to talk about that and so much more when we come back. First, I want to talk to you about MyPillow. I love Mike Lindell. I love MyPillow, and I love the fact that it's an American company that cares about Americans and American ingenuity. And that's why Mike and I believe, have this great, strong relationship. We're both great patriots. We love our country. And right now you can save over 85%, listen to this, on all season slippers. You can get deep discounts. And I don't know if you've all worn these or any of you have them, but they are so comfortable. They are amazing. You can wear them in the winter or in the summer. They have men's and women's My Slippers, and you can get them thong style, or you can get them like, covered sandals that are like shoes, slip-on shoes. You can walk in total comfort with these slippers because they're a 4-tiered cushioning system that is so comfortable to your feet. You feel like you're walking on clouds. So these won't last long, folks. Hurry up and shop mypillow.com during the all-season slipper closeout sale. Get the all-season slipper for only $25 with promo code Carter, and that's while supplies last. Also, check out MyPillow's new products, including the My Mattress Topper 2.0 and the MyPillow 2.0 at mypillow.com, promo code Carter. mypillow.com, promo code Carter. That's mypillow.com, promo code Carter. So I want to get back to my story because a part of me, I'm so grateful to God. I think about Salim. He's here now with his beautiful wife. They have this amazing son, Ahmed, and now they just had a baby girl. She is the first generation of their family born in the United States of America. And they came here and did everything the right way. Salim went through all the background checks, every check you can imagine. And he refused to leave the base, even though he could. He was actually in New Jersey for a while, even though they said, well, you could leave the base, but if you do, you're not going to be able to go through the same process that those who did the whole clearance will be able to do. They won't be able to take advantages of all the job opportunities and stuff. And he said, no, absolutely not. And they spent I would say around 8 months or 9 months living in tents on the base in New Jersey. And it was a mess. It was a mess because also among them, and Salim actually helped U.S. forces. He had an SIV visa. He was a special interest visa because of all the work that he did for the United States. And he was my translator as well when I went over there to work. So he was completely cleared. He is a true ally and a true American. But there were people there inside the base and throughout the United States, people that had rushed onto these planes, and we didn't even know who was coming on board some of these planes. They were taking off with overloaded with people who didn't get security clearances, who didn't have background checks, and many of them who we didn't even know who they were until they got here to the United States. We saw all kinds of issues with that. But we also left so many of our allies, real, true allies, behind. And people are still trying to get out of Afghanistan. But I want you to picture in your mind what it must be like to live in a country right? Where you know everything's changing for you, where everything will be turned upside down, where your daughters will no longer be allowed to go to school, where your allies have just walked away overnight, where you feel like maybe I didn't do enough to fight for what we needed to fight for to hold on to this territory. A country where also soldiers, so many troops, so many Americans lost their lives, where empires go to die, right? Afghanistan. It's so disheartening, and it's so heartbreaking. We think about those that lost their lives. My best friend, our best friend, Brian, who lost his life. There's so many other young troops that lost their lives there. The last thing they saw was, that godforsaken war. And I get it. I get it. Most Americans wanted out. They didn't want to be there anymore. But I want you to think about this. It's about doing things the right way. Afghanistan, the Biden administration left $80-something billion worth of equipment in that region. We have Al-Qaeda all over the ground now. Trust me, they're there. They are training in villages throughout that region. And I was just speaking recently to a friend of mine in Pakistan who is watching this happen across the board in South Asia. 20 years of war. And many of us can't even remember why we were there. We were there because the Taliban allowed that nation to be the training ground for Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda had one mission and one mission only, a main mission. And that was the destruction of the West and the destruction of our way of life. And many of us have forgotten about those terrorist attacks that took all those American lives, the day that they flew into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the crash in Pennsylvania. Many of us have forgotten about the Bataclan attacks or the attacks in England in the underground. Many of us have forgotten about what happened in Madrid with the Madrid train bombings. Many of us have forgotten about the terrorists that are still here today in our country and across the globe, waiting for an opportunity to target us. Thanks for joining me today. If you love our show and you don't like John Kirby, go ahead and subscribe to my channel here on YouTube and Rumble. Thank you. John Kirby should be ashamed of himself. This administration should be so ashamed of themselves. So many people never came home. Never came home. They came home in a coffin, but not ever see their families again, or their sons and daughters, or any of their loved ones, or their families. They never celebrated another Christmas. They were lost in that grave of empires, right? That's where they died, along with so many other foreign fighters that have gone into that region that have believed that they would somehow win over that ancient part of the world. But there is one thing that we should learn from, and I don't know if we have, and that is that as a nation, we should be willing to follow through. We shouldn't be willing to walk away because we are never now going to be able to turn our backs against that enemy. John Kirby said one thing that is true, and I'm going to play this soundbite. He said, "The enemy has its say," and I want to play that really quick.
In reading this, you seem to be conceding that evacuation should have happened sooner and faster, saying we now prioritize earlier evacuations, noting that today you would message evacuations more aggressively. I understand you've made clear the president does not have any regrets about his decision to withdraw, but in hindsight, in reading this, Does the president have any regrets about how this withdrawal was carried out?
The president's very proud of the manner in which the men and women of the military, the foreign service, the intelligence community, I went on and on and on, conducted this withdrawal. But look, I've been around operations my entire life, and there's not a single one that ever goes perfectly according to plan. Things happen. Sometimes enemies get a vote, and you always want to learn from that.
And then later, he talked about the fact that the administration really didn't know how bad things were going in Afghanistan. Take a listen to this.
And clearly we didn't get things right here with Afghanistan about how fast the Taliban were moving across the country. I don't think we fully anticipated the degree to which they were constructing these deals in the hinterlands that kind of fell like dominoes. We didn't anticipate how fast the Afghan National Security Forces were going to fold. We're not going to fight for their country, particularly after we had, as I said, dedicated 20 years, trained and equipped them. I don't think we fully appreciated the degree of corruption that was in the officer ranks in the military. I could go on and on and on.
He's lying. He knew very well how bad it was. I was on the ground with him too, years and years ago. And we had been talking about that very thing. We had been talking about it because we watched how our billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that we poured into, by the way, taxpayer dollars, that we poured into Afghanistan were being mismanaged, had no oversight, and were being put into the pockets of some of the most ruthless people in that region. He knew, because as I knew, a lot of the military, even our trained special forces in that region, and those are the indigenous people of Afghanistan that were being trained, other than the ones that our intelligence divisions were training, a lot of them were not getting paid. They were not getting their checks. They were fighting in a war and not getting their checks. We knew because we knew what was going on with the Taliban. We knew that they were taking over Kandahar. We knew that they had taken Helmand. We knew before the withdrawal that they were spreading. And we knew before the withdrawal that Al-Qaeda was reconstituting itself in Afghanistan. And you're right, John. The enemy does have its say. It really does. And now that we walked away completely from that region of the world because of this administration's bad planning, Al-Qaeda is rebuilding itself. And over the last 3 years of this presidency, there has been nothing but chaos at our border and a wide open border. And if ever was a time for a terror cell to make its way into the United States, it surely has probably already happened under your administration. Because again, you lie to the American people and you lie with impunity. And I think that's what makes me and so many Americans so frustrated and so angry. But God help you and everyone else. Don't forget the people that sacrificed everything. Don't forget it was you that walked away from those sacrifices. And just remember, when they come back again, when the enemy returns, and the enemy was allowed to return, don't make the same mistake twice. Guys, follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. We need it. And God bless the great state of Texas.